Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam and this is a Chinese snowball viburnum. This is the beautiful, very large growing Chinese snowball viburnum. Chinese snowball viburnum can eventually reach 20 feet in height, but are pretty easy to maintain less than 10 feet. They're hardy in zone 6 to 9, but probably in zone 6A, you'd probably want to use it closer to a house or in a more protected space. Once they're established, if they're happy, these Chinese viburnum can actually grow quite a bit in a single season. This one right here was pruned probably sometime in the late spring, and it actually has almost 2 feet of new growth on it. Probably do slightly less in the ground, but it does have a vigorous growth rate. Sun or shade can kind of be tricky on these viburnum. The further south you go, as you get into zone 8, 9, even into probably 10A, these need to be in some late day shade. The foliage is very large on these, and I don't think they're very tolerant of 15 hours of direct sun. As you get further up into zone 6 or 7, I think you could probably put them in quite a bit more sun. Ideally, you'd have these in lots and lots of morning sun and early afternoon sun, and then going into the shade late in the day. Since the Chinese snowball bush gets so much bigger than the Viburnum opulus or the Eastern Snowball Bush, it really does need a lot of space, and it's almost like a small tree. It can go on the corner of a foundation, but not really along a foundation at all. Really, really fantastic on a wood line where it gets lots of morning sun and stays in the sun until about 2 or 3, and then is in a little bit of shade in the late day. Obviously, the main feature on these Chinese viburnum is these beautiful clusters of flowers, which can be quite large in comparison to, many of you be familiar with Viburnum opulus roseum, which is the Eastern snowball. It grows up into much colder zones, probably grows up into zone 4 or 5 as well. Those have balls on them about like this. These can get more like 12 inches in diameter. This thing is really quite vigorous. The flowers start out green like this, which is very attractive, and then open up more and more and more and become these very large clusters of flowers over time. The foliage is actually quite nice on this plant. I don't even think this plant needs to flower. It's great that it does, but the foliage is really nice, rich, dark green, typical of a lot of viburnums. Just really beautiful foliage and great structure on this plant. And really, I don't know if we're going to call this a large shrub or a tree, really, because it really is almost a small tree. And probably the #1 feature of these is the fact that it blooms twice a year. We almost always get a repeat flowering in the fall, as you can see with this very large group here. I've included planting instruction videos in the description of this video for planting woody trees and shrubs in clay or sand. These are pretty rugged plants, and as long as you don't bury anything that's not buried when you take it out of the container, you do a pretty good job of breaking up the roots, because they can be slightly root bound on a larger plant, then you're probably not going to have very many problems with these. For the first year your viburnum's in the ground, you'll want to check on it occasionally for water. Just put your finger down in the ground a couple inches. If it's dry, drown the space around it. If it's moist, leave it alone. This is a plant that will underperform in a very dry space, so it's extremely drought tolerant. Don't think you'll kill it without giving it water if you're in an area that gets regular rainfall. But if you let it get extremely dry, especially in the late summer, and early fall a lot of times can be really dry, and these will repeat bloom in the fall. It's fall now when I'm shooting this. In fact, it's almost November, and this whole group has come back into bloom. It bloomed once in the late spring, and now it's blooming again. It really struggles with that second blooming if they're abnormally dry. So sometime during the summer, if you're going 2-3 weeks without rain, this is probably one that you're going to want to address. This plant has great foliage and flowers, and you can definitely get more of those by fertilizing it sometime in the late winter or early spring. After the worst of your winter is over, any kind of outdoor slow release fertilizer, something that lasts 3 to 4 months, is ideal. These viburnum are best pruned after they flower in the late spring or early summer, and you can get after them pretty hard, and they'll have enough time to come back out of that, which is what happened here. This plant was actually cut down right here. It's put on a foot of growth since then, sometime probably around May or June, and it's got a flower on it again in the fall. So that's how you go about that, after the first flowering in the spring. There are quite a few chewing insects that will get on these viburnums, including several different beetles. There are insecticidal soaps that will take care of some of the smaller bodied insects. In terms of beetles, you have to trap them and that kind of thing. But Japanese beetles and some other types of beetles will get on these during that season. That's usually a pretty short season, not that big of a deal. These are on some deer resistant list, and the deer resistant list says because they're slightly fragrant, but I get no fragrance from these whatsoever. So I'm a little suspicious of that, and I just don't have any experience with it. I've grown these for years, and we do have deer in the nursery, but we have roses and other things that they go to way before they'd ever go to these. So I don't think it's at the top of their list, but I don't buy the fact that it's deer resistant. So what are you waiting for? I'm very confident that you can grow the Chinese snowball bush. Thank you very much for watching my video, and if it was helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Also comment below with any questions you have about viburnums.